They said it was a complete waste of money. $300 for land no one else would touch. An orchard that had already started dying. Trees that barely produced. Soil that wouldn't hold. And a future that didn't look like it had one. Everyone told him the same thing. Walk away. Because nothing about it made sense. Not the condition, not the price, and definitely not the risk. Some of them laughed, not quietly, but openly, because to them, this wasn't a gamble. It was a mistake. He didn't argue, didn't try to explain it. He just bought it and went to work. Year after year, with no shortcuts, no guarantees, and no one expecting it to change. But 11 years later, the same orchard was feeding 3 entire counties, and the people who laughed were the ones trying to understand how. The orchard hadn't failed overnight. It had been declining for years, yields dropping a little more each season, trees producing less fruit, until some stopped producing at all, branches dry, leaves thinning, entire rows that looked like they were just waiting to be cut down. The soil wasn't helping. Hard in some places, too loose in others. Water wouldn't stay where it was needed. And where it didn't do much. Previous owners had tried to fix it. Different methods, different treatments. Nothing that lasted, because the problem wasn't simple. It wasn't just the trees, or just the soil. It was everything working against itself. And once it gets to that point, most people don't try to rebuild it. They replace it, clear the land, start over, or walk away entirely. That's what everyone expected him to do. Because restoring something like that doesn't come with quick results. It takes time. More time than most people are willing to invest. Years of work. With no clear sign it will pay off. And that's what made it look like a bad decision. Not just risky, but pointless. Because from the outside, there was nothing about that orchard that suggested it could come back. Nothing obvious, nothing easy, nothing worth betting on, unless you knew what to look for. He didn't try to fix everything at once. Didn't rush it, because nothing about it could be rushed. He started with the soil, breaking it down, working it by hand in places machines couldn't help, letting it breathe again instead of forcing it to produce. Then the trees, not replacing them, not cutting everything out, but working with what was still alive, grafting, pruning, taking back what years of neglect had taken away. It didn't look like progress, not at first. From the outside, it looked the same. Dead sections, weak growth, long days with nothing to show for it. And that's when people started talking again. Not laughing this time, but questioning it. How long is he going to keep doing this? Why not just start over? Why hold on to something that's already gone? Because that's what it looked like. A man putting years into something that wasn't coming back. Season after season, small changes. Too small for anyone else to notice. Too slow to prove anything. And for a long time, there was nothing that clearly said it was working. Just effort, time, and the decision to keep going anyway. The change didn't happen all at once. It started small. So small, most people wouldn't have noticed it. One of the older trees, the kind everyone had already written off, began to produce again. Not much, a few apples at first, then a few more. Nothing that looked like a recovery. But something that shouldn't have been happening at all. Because that tree wasn't supposed to come back, He saw it immediately. Not just the fruit, but what it meant. The soil underneath it had changed, holding moisture longer, feeding differently. The kind of shift you don't see from the surface, but changes everything over time. He didn't celebrate it, didn't call anyone over to look, because he knew something most people don't, that when something starts to recover, it doesn't do it loudly. It does it quietly. And if you rush it, you lose it. So he kept going. Same process, same patience, letting it build instead of forcing it to prove itself. And slowly, not quickly, other trees started to follow, still uneven, still far from what it used to be, but no longer going in one direction, because for the first time in years, the orchard wasn't declining. It was turning. By the time people started paying attention again, it didn't look like the same place. The rows that had once been empty were filled. Trees that barely held fruit now carried full branches. Not perfect, not uniform, but strong, consistent, alive. The soil held, the water stayed, and the orchard, that had once been written off, was producing again. But it didn't stop there, because what he had built wasn't just recovery. It was capacity, the kind that doesn't just support itself, but reaches beyond it. Orders started coming in, first local, then further out, one town, then another, until it wasn't just supplying nearby markets anymore. It was feeding entire counties, 3 of them, regularly, consistently. The same land that had been dismissed as worthless was now doing what most people thought it never could. And the people who had laughed were the ones asking about it, trying to understand how something they had walked away from had turned into something this reliable, this productive, this valuable. But standing there, looking across an orchard that had come back to life, there was only one thing left to understand. It hadn't been beyond saving. It had just needed someone willing to stay long enough to see it through. After that, no one called it a bad investment anymore. Not that land, not that orchard, not after seeing what it had become. But nothing about it had changed overnight. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. And it wasn't something new that suddenly appeared. It was the same land, the same trees, the same soil. The only difference was time. Time that most people weren't willing to give. Because when something looks like it's already finished, it's easier to walk away, easier to start over, easier to choose something that works right now. But some things don't work that way. They don't respond quickly. They don't prove themselves early. And they definitely don't look promising in the beginning. They just wait for someone willing to stay with them long enough. He didn't rush it, didn't try to force results, didn't abandon it when nothing seemed to change. He just kept going, long after most people would have stopped. Standing there, in an orchard that had once been written off, he understood something most people never give anything the chance to show. That the difference between something being a mistake and something becoming valuable is often just how long you're willing to hold on. And sometimes, that's all it takes.